Oh, there we go. So as a developer, you have several key advisors. You have various types of attorneys, accountants, your builders, sometimes engineers. Your architect is a crucial part of your team. A key difference between your architect and the rest of the team is that your architect is your best advocate from the conception of the project till the closeout of the project. We're generalists by training, and we can guide you through the project and the process, identifying opportunities that you may not have even seen there, that only comes from our experience. We also keep an eye out for limitations and issues on the horizon. And we're your advocate, whether it's with L&I whether it's with L&I, it's often with L&I, whether it's through a community engagement process, we need zoning variances, or there's some other type of engagement that's necessary, or during construction. We're skilled advisors that see the big picture and the overall arc of continuity of the project. Architects, we come with our own team, and the people in our team are critical to the success of the project. We have our structural engineers, we have our MEP consultants, we have a range of civil engineers, we have every type of consultant you can possibly imagine, right down to a coffee barista consultant for a coffee shop we designed. And the relationships that we have with our consultant team are part of the value that we offer, because we work with these people day in and day out. They know how we work, we know how they work, and that directly translates into the output of the project. So the process of developing, designing, and building a building in Philadelphia, or really anywhere for that matter, is a long, multi-phase, often multi-year process. Between zoning code changes, building code changes, site conditions, stakeholder feedback, community engagement, site constraints, surprises that come up when you start demo, there is never a shortage of uncertainty and problem solving. I don't trust anyone who is too confident in their absolute knowledge of what's going to come with these projects, because there are always surprises. The only thing I trust absolutely is that there will be surprises. Challenges, problems to be solved along the way. And I, for one, thrive on problem solving. That's part of what I enjoy about my job. It's the surprises, and hopefully resolving them in a way that lessens the blow for the client. And if you take anything away from our conversation tonight, I hope it's that architects are not merely looked at as a source for plans. We can do a lot more than that, and we can support the project in many, many ways. So for our conversation today, I'm going to share several projects that my firm has worked on, and aim to get into brass tacks with you, and sort of for this audience, I want to open it up and talk about what the client relationship was like, what some of the challenges we faced, how the project came to be. And at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not going to hit everything. I'm going to kind of go through a lot of images pretty fast, so happy to answer any questions. And we all know that the process can be brutal at times, but also extremely rewarding. And I'll share some wins, struggles, lessons learned, and how the projects came to be. I'll also share some of our projects that illustrate the depth of our practice and how opportunities have presented themselves and enabled the firm to evolve in exciting ways. I'm going to start by talking about this project. It's 2 single-family homes at 21st and Lombard. And I'm sharing this picture because this was my parking spot. It's 2 blocks from our office. I parked here for several years, and I saw a small for sale sign pop up on the handwritten for sale sign pop up. And we had been a couple years into practice, and I have at this point, you're talking 2020, a range of clients, and I know what type of projects they're all looking for. So I always have my eyes open. I took a picture, sent it to a client, and he ultimately purchased it. He put it under contract. We did an exhaustive feasibility study. We do a lot of feasibility work. For most projects, clients will I recommend it. You put it under contract, you give yourself enough time to look at the zoning, look at, all the potential pitfalls that can come, talk to a contractor, figure out what the budget is going to be. In this case, it's a double corner site, 2,400 square foot lot, RM1 zoning. We looked at this, the client really wanted to know everything, and we're happy to oblige. We looked at, one giant house, 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses. How many parking spaces can we get in here? How many garage spots? Could we do below grade parking? Should we do condos? Literally everything that we could possibly think of. We landed on 2 homes, large homes. These are very high upscale homes, about 5,000 square feet each. And now what's interesting about this project is that this is on the 2100 block of Lombard Street, 2200 block of Lombard Street. And like most of Philly, they're all row homes. They range from 16 to 18 feet wide, and there's a really strong rhythm. So right here, this was the maximum build on this site, this diagram. And, I'll step back. We discovered we required 2 variances for this project, which is going to explain why these diagrams exist. One variance was for off-street parking. The client wanted to make sure at this price point that they were offering off-street parking for both homes, and they wanted to add additional ceiling height. So, the 38-foot height limit that Philadelphia has is an odd number because it's too much for 3 stories and not enough for 4. And so we went for the variance for this one, and through experience, I knew that you're allowed 38 feet of height for the roof. However, you are also allowed 42 inches for a parapet. So you're effectively allowed for a building height of 42 and a half feet. So when we presented to the RCO, when we presented to the ZBA, we effectively said, we will stay 6 inches below the 42 and a half feet line. So we have a 42-foot tall building, and you can absolutely tell it's not a perceptible difference from the street. And we breezed right through. And beyond that, this was the max build out. We did not advocate for this because, when you start adding, the buildings are giant already. You don't need to add bay windows and pilot houses. We found that we could build a building that felt more connected to the block by continuing the cornice line around and adding a division through the middle. So these are square-shaped houses, which are much more generous feeling than a long, narrow house, but they maintain proportions and deference to the block. We also discovered a loophole in the zoning code. Well, I don't know if you want to call it a loophole. There was an interesting zoning path to allow for 100% lot coverage. In RM1, if you have streets on 3 sides, there's a checklist of things that if you meet, very few sites in the city actually meet it. This one did, and we took advantage of it, and that allowed us to have parking on the ground floor as well as livable space. And then we effectively moved the outdoor space to the second floor. So I'll click through. Oh, sure, go ahead.
I had a question. You was able to get the parking and then the cuts and all that crap.
Mm-hmm.
The RCO let you do that?
They did. There was
Who was the RCO?
CCRA. They wanted us to reduce it to 1, and then, but at that point, it was a parking lot. So the one off of 21st Street was already there. So it really made no difference. We're actually reducing the amount of cars coming and going, and it was really for the one off the alley.
I know that area. I live around there, and I know that spot. It's a nice building, actually. But question:
Sure.
You didn't need no yard space?
No, it's the outdoor space is on the second floor. So you could.
Say it again?
The outdoor space is on the second floor.
That cut out right there.
Yeah, so if you could sort of see it right here,
That's your outdoor space.
that's the outdoor space.
It's not that outdoor space is for the fire or something like that. Skating out. That's not that outdoor space is for.
Nope, not in this case, no.
So how does 100% carve-out work?
It's
This is hard property?
it's because it has streets on 3 sides.
Oh, 3.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm happy to share it with you. It's because it's and RM1, and it has to do with the lot being less than 45 feet deep, and there's a long checklist, and if you can sort of follow it through, and LNI fully accepts it.
When you did the, when they did the RTO, did you have a full diagram or you just had that diagram? Did you know?
We had for the RCO, we had a 100-page presentation. That's for the RCO and the ZBA, and that's why we breezed through. But it's a lot of this where we kind of click through, we talk through, we explain why, why things are the way they are. I'm staying on the slides a little longer than I normally do, but that's why, we kind of coast through. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just one question. So when you put the property under agreement, when you were doing all of your research, was that a contingency period?
It was. And to be clear, this is not my development. I am the architect for this project. But yeah, so we always advocate give yourself a reasonable due diligence period.
And I don't know if everybody knows, but you have a contingency period, so if things don't work out, you can back out.
Absolutely, yeah. So you get generally, we're doing a feasibility study right now for a 45-unit building that is a very complicated one. It's a condominium within a bigger complex, and it is extensions on top of extensions to try to make sure everything is ironed out. And we're even going through the historical commission in concept capacity so that we can understand what we can do, and there's no question about it. It's very typical to go through the zoning board or go through zoning and make sure your zoning is approved before you close as well. As much as you can get. Yeah, I think it's going to be what the seller will let you get away with, but I think 30 to 45 days is usually enough to know what you need to know. And then if you need a zoning contingency, that'll generally extend beyond that. Or if it's historic, if you're in you want to know if your property is in a historic district because what you can do with it is severely limited. It's not a bad thing. I'm a big fan of the historic districts, but you need to know that going in because it ultimately affects the value because it affects what you can do with the building.
How long does a feasibility study take?
It depends on what you need, and it depends on how long and how in depth and specific to the project. Like for me, for our clients. When we are, somebody's, we have a very open door type policy. If somebody's looking at buying something, they give me a call and I say, what can I do with the zoning here? Today that it's easier and easier to know what you can do with the zoning. When I was getting started, it was, you had to like open the code all the time, but now you have Atlas, you have the city has like a zoning generator that'll essentially tell you more or less in broad strokes what you can do with the property. And you take that and you plug it into Chat GPT and you can get pretty far along with what you can do. It does not replace your architect, but it certainly empowers you as a developer. So this project, as I was saying, this is actually 2 blocks from my office. So, we spent a lot of time on the site here. We, throughout construction, especially while the masonry was happening, we were out 3 times a day. We were out in the morning. We wanted to see what happened the day before. We were out at lunch because we wanted to see what they were doing, and then we came out at night on our way home because we wanted to see what they were about to do. And that had to do with a lot of subtle details, and it was patterning and making sure the datums were all where they're supposed to be. And it was a lot of lunch breaks basically spent walking over there to check on it. And give you a sense of the interior. So this is looking out at that outdoor space. This is essentially a private courtyard. And this is going to go out, so everybody will get this. I have a lot, so I'm gonna go quick. And this gives you a sense of it. You can see how it's really dialed in with the cornice lines. You can see the outdoor space. You can see how this is a 42-foot tall building, but you don't, with a full roof deck above, no pilot houses. This project, it's called the Francis. It's at 20th and Girard between Francisville and Fairmount. This is another interesting project for us. This is a 13-unit multifamily. We were brought into this project by the broker. And this happens often. The broker wants to know, what can I do with this property? So how do I market it? In this case, it was, I think, maybe 2019 when this happened. He reached out and said, Evan, can you take a look at this? I'm curious what we can do. So I come out, he has a client who is, interested in the site. We get talking and very interested. This is a roughly 6,000 square foot RM1 site. And, for everybody who's not, who doesn't know what RM1 is, that is the lower tier multifamily zoning. It's really nice when you find larger RM1 sites because it means it's generally an as-of-right project. So we, again, did a feasibility study. This is actually a really interesting site because what you have here is a historic brownstone fronting onto Girard. There's a row of them. And these are actually not historically protected. So the client, the developer who approached us, if he wanted to, he could have demolished this. Fortunately, I didn't need to convince him not to. He wanted to keep it. But what we would do with it was the question. Do we divide it into 2 units? Do we keep it as one? And frankly, it's a long, narrow site. It's about 30 feet by 230 feet. So how do you actually add 13 units to this site? Which is, so the challenge was how do you add the units and how do you get light to all of the units? Because you don't want to have dark, units facing a side yard. So what the client ultimately did was, we tested, again, parking. Everybody wants to know about parking. How can you get it on the site? This one was too narrow. It was, we showed him what it looked like. 30 feet is a little, it's basically too narrow to get parking on this site. So he let go of the parking. And we looked at different ways to distribute the units, and we found that 2 buildings was actually the way to go. So by dividing into 2 separate buildings, you have an 8-unit building, a 4-unit building, and then you have the brownstone. And what he did, because the brownstone had been recently renovated, he, maybe not recently, but like recently enough, he effectively created a condominium. So each building is a condo, and then within each of those are another condo. So it was an interesting legal setup. But what he did was he sold the brownstone as a single. And what that did was that effectively lowered his basis on the whole deal. So he, it reduced his equity, it gave him some equity back right away. And that allowed him to move forward with the project. So this one was as of right. This required no zoning, zoning variances. This is a fully as of right project. This diagram gives you a sense of the brownstone and the garage in the back. It was actually, seeing the site was very unique. This whole block is essentially in the process of turning over into multifamily because everybody is seeing that they're RM1, and when they come up, this was a single family home with a 200-foot rear yard. It's it's not the best case for density in this neighborhood. But yeah, this was a single family and by right zoning. So we looked at how we can make these units work, and the way we did it was by starting to add courtyards and add light wells, and then beyond that, oops, I don't know why that's doing that. Beyond that, we pulled the corners of the roof line down. So as you can see, it kind of cuts off like that. And the point being, we're creating a series of outdoor spaces, and the light just gets right down into these spaces. So you have, this was the fun drawing I had to include. You get a series of these types of spaces where people, they're close. It's, we joke that it's kind of European style, but you have a series of courtyards, large sliding glass windows with Juliet balconies, and lots of common spaces.
You said it was RM1.
This is RM1.
But you got how many apartments in there?
13. Well, 12 apartments with the brownstone.
Because of the size of it.
Yep. Yep. We did take advantage of the mixed income housing bonus for this project. That gave us extra height. So that gave us up to, that did not add density. We didn't take advantage of additional density, but we did add height. So we were able to go 45 feet here. But it doesn't feel 45 feet because you have, because of the way we pulled all the the roof lines down and essentially added gables. And then from Girard, you really can't tell that there's a 16,000 square foot building in the backyard of that brownstone. It's a fleeting glimpse as you drive by, you'll see this there. And then, we had some fun with how it connected to the existing building. And then one of the benefits of the cool roof lines and the roof geometry was that the top floor ended up having really cool roof lines. It had cathedral ceilings, and it was very much expressed on the inside. Rather than keeping a flat ceiling, we expressed it. And you can see you have the Juliet balconies, sliding doors. This is looking towards Gerard. You know, I think the client would not normally have done this many windows, but it was really imperative to have this much glass in order for the building to feel, you know, open. And then there's a shared roof deck.
How much is that project?
You know, in today's dollars, I have no idea because they finished it 2 years ago. You know, things are more getting. It's hard to say.
How much was it 2 years ago?
I want to say maybe 175 a foot, something like that. Maybe 175. I get really per square foot. Yeah. I'll caution you, the dollar per foot number is always misleading because, you know, if you ask, people ask me all the time, like, you know, what's this going to cost per foot? But there's so many variables, you know, you want to be cautious using those types of numbers for anything beyond like very preliminary, you know, assumptions. Oh, construction? It depends on what you're talking about. You know, like adaptive reuse versus new construction and, you know, what is in the building. There's too many variables. We'll talk after this. I'm not going to say a number. We'll talk after this.
Just take the Jumpstart training. We'll teach you.
So I'm going to jump a little bit. This is these are all not, I'm not only showing high-end projects, by the way. This is kind of, I'm taking on an arc. This is for a private client, who came to us and wanted he wanted a high-end, essentially a high-end condo. This is, you know, we joined 2 condominium units, which had a lot of complication in terms of, you know, joining the units, you know, getting the building to approve it, you know, on and on and on. You know, working within a big building always presents complications, tying in the utilities, you know, that kind of thing. This project was really enjoyable for us because it had lots and lots of millwork and fun, high-end, like cool finishes, and it was, you know, it's enjoyable for us when it was done. The actual construction here was a total nightmare, and involving 2 contractors that we, you know, as the architect, we essentially had to make that transition because the second one came in after the first one left, and we had to, you know, we effectively found ourselves on this site like multiple days a week. We were there way more than we should have been. And where this led with the client, you know, where it led with the client was like, why are you here so much and the builder's not? And it's, you know, recognizing that it was the only way that these details were going to be accomplished. And he was very much set on seeing that through.
So you were interacting with the carpenters and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Not the framing, but the actual
this project,
finished stuff.
that project, we ended up, you know, helping with ordering, with, you know, we sourcing most of the materials. We were going beyond what typically an architect would do. So the client, he had a close relative who was doing another house and, you know, of a similar finish level. And he approached us and said, you spent so much time in construction administration chasing down the GC. Do you want to just build it? And, you know, I have a design build background. And that was really exciting for me because I really love construction, and it's, you know, the ability to drive the ship was exciting. So we said yes. We set up the general contracting company. We dealt with the insurance. We got our contracts. We got all of the stuff you need to run a true general contracting company, and we built this for his daughter, and. You know, we had the challenges, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, very, very specific details that, you know, I think it would take a very specific builder to be able to do. We were just really relentless because we, you know, probably cared too much. It's also a block from our office, which allowed us to be there all the time.
You consider this not a high-end project?
This is a very high-end project, yes. I said I'm not only showing, but this is, it's, yeah. So one of the, go ahead. This is in Rittenhouse Square. Yep. So one of the key things about this project for us was, one, it pushed us to set ourselves up as a design build company, and it allowed us to really test out our ability to see through construction. And this is construction. It's not like open the door and let somebody show up. It's basically active site supervision for all trades and really watching and talking through the ins and outs of where everything is and dealing with, metal fabricators and special finishes, etc. It was a great test for us. We really enjoyed it. It was a success. And where we went with it is we took it to our development work. So aside from the, I showed you some, developer spec house. I showed you a multifamily project that we did, and then a high-end condo. Another thing we do is we do development as well. So we are generally focused on more social impact work. So this project is at 40th and Girard. This is it's the old Lou Blum towing building. The address is on 50,000 signs across the city. We've been slowly converting this building into active commercial spaces. So we started in 2018, and the idea is, lots of people have approached us for, uses like storage and that kind of thing, and we've been really resistant to it because the idea is, open up the windows that are infilled with block, bring active uses that bring activity to the street and also a benefit to the neighborhood, because frankly there's not a lot of new commercial in East Parkside, and we felt like this was a real opportunity to bring it. Raise your hand.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mixon.
No, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that my name is Joy Smith.
Oh, I thought I recognized you there. Nice to see you.
East Parkside. And so that building is, what you've done, it's very welcomed in our neighborhood. But I want to know if you have any insight, and I don't want to go off track, but if you have an insight of how communities such as East Parkside can work with developers, architects to have their facades more aligned with the integrity of the block. I know in high-income neighborhoods that, that's kind of a given. But how, do you have any insight how we can work with developers, architects, I know they've got money too.
Yeah.
And their facade can more align to some extent with existing properties or structures like the block.
Yeah, there are ways. Queen Village has a neighborhood conservation overlay in the zoning code. And that's one way that they essentially make the plan. I mean, the RCO doesn't look at it, but the planning commission will review for compliance. And that's how you will avoid having on a block with all, first floor porches, ending up with, that one house that just sticks out that didn't care. Things like that, that's how you can avoid it.
And we're working on an NCO now.
Oh, are you? That's great. Beyond that, it's really, unless the project requires a variance, it's really hard to exert much influence over it.
Thank you.
Yep.
You can keep being loud about how much you don't like the way it looks. I think that helps. Just advocate for buildings that look the way you want it to, right? And be proponents of that. I mean, I know a lot of Jumpstarters they don't do much exterior work, if any, right? And that always is awesome for the neighbors to see a brand new rental unit inside that's going to house potentially a middle higher income tenant and grow the tax base, but also keep it looking like a neighborhood where people feel comfortable in.
And I'll also say it's a double-edged sword, because the more restrictions you put, the more you turn people away and make it harder to develop. So it's a very delicate balance.
What was the zoning on this?
This one's CMX2. So this is a fully by right project. We're taking an old garage building, and we're essentially taking these giant spaces, and we're just trying to find, positive uses for them. So this one right here, I kind of jumped around. I can jump around, that's fine. Just pretend you didn't see that. This is the building, and it's big. It fronts onto 40th Street and it fronts onto Cambridge Street. It's about 22,000 square feet. So for this one, the towing company moved out, and we were very motivated to find somebody for this space who was going to allow us to, take the CMU blocks out of all those windows, allow light into the space, And like I keep saying, bring an active use. So this is Philadelphia City Rowing is the organization. They're a really, really positive nonprofit. They bring rowing as a sport to people who really wouldn't have access to it otherwise, kids across the city. And, this project really helped us pilot a model for, bringing our design services to organizations that wouldn't really have access to architects in the same way. Like when these guys needed a space, it's very, in the entitlements process, or like in the leasing process, sorry, when they want to know what they can do with the space, to go out and bring an architect in to then like measure the space, come up with options, do renderings, that is an obstacle that a lot of nonprofits, just can't overcome, or not easily overcome. And, PCR is actually a pretty, well-funded nonprofit as they go, and it was still difficult for them. So what we were able to do, since this is our project, we're able to say, we're going to take those fees and we're going to put them into the lease and make this something that you don't have to pay today. There's ways to put skin in the game and make sure that they're serious. But we were able to essentially, as soon as they show interest and they express that they know that it's going to work, we start designing, and we effectively do a turnkey project. And there's a lot of detail and legality to how it all worked out. It was not simple the first time, about how it gets paid for and, how the risk is shared. And I'm happy to go into all of that, but it's, that the gist of it is that we were able to figure out a model for, doing design work for nonprofits in our building. And this is the space. So this is about a 9,000 square foot space. This project was done for about $240,000 2 years ago. It's a bunker of a building. It's concrete and steel. We added 5 bathrooms. We added changing rooms. We patched the concrete. We added an HVAC, a $65,000 HVAC system to the space. Added windows, and it is exactly what we wanted. It's a positive, active use that's been received pretty well on the block.
So this is your building?
It is.
They're not private, okay.
And I'm going to go back up a little bit. So this building right here was 4029 Cambridge. This is a small building right next door. And this one, similar to the PCR space, we served as the architect, builder, and developer for this one. It is also CMX2, which is part of why it was interesting to us, because it had the commercial zoning. We wouldn't have pursued it if it was residential zoning. And the interesting thing about this was this was the second construction project that we did. This was right after we finished the home that I showed in the fancy one, this one. And the interesting thing is that we used the exact same subcontractor team to do both projects. And this is what it looks like now. And the way we did that was, and this comes back to thinking about the value of your architect and the skills that they have. We designed the whole process, so that the electrician could get in and get out very efficiently. Each trade was in and out. It was very designed around their process, so they could effectively give us the best pricing possible that still worked for them. And these are subs that are generally regarded as high-end subs, and we were able to pull this off for I want to say $80 a square foot, and that includes refinishing all the existing floors. That includes painting and restoring the brick, fully put full AV system. What else? Full new electrical, plumbing, a 2-zone HVAC system, the whole 9. And masonry restoration. We did a nice restoration as well. And the last project I'm going to share is, this one is another project that's in our office right now. This is a I want to say a fairly complicated adaptive reuse that we're doing. This is at 15th and Waverly in Rittenhouse, also in Rittenhouse. And this building the existing building is 17,000 square feet. It is it is in the historic district. It was CMX 1 zoning, which is, fairly complicated zoning. It's, or not complicated. It's just not very favorable zoning because it's unclear exactly what the use would be. And Ultimately, this was on the market. I saw this property and pursued it, and we had it under contract. And what we discovered was that the seller was not going to give us the contingency for historic and for zoning. It required both of those. And nobody, nobody who was going to invest in this project or was investing in the project wanted to take the risk that we wouldn't get those approvals. And that's fair on their part. I understand that. I mean, I felt strongly that we could do it. We go through historic often, and we go through the zoning board often, and we have a good track record. We have good relationships, but this is a lot of money, and to invest in this project, it's 32 units, and at the end of the day, our deal fell apart because they didn't trust that we could, or didn't want to take the risk that we could get through. At that point, we had done an in-concept review with the Historical Commission, who had effectively blessed the project. They said they felt, they more or less agreed that the project was feasible. We had to come back for the full review, which I'll mention an in-concept review I highly recommend if you're doing a project in a contingency period and you want to find out what you can do in a historic property. So we went through that. We had a full development plan for this. We just didn't have any money to do the project. So I, again, have a client. I thought, I know somebody who would like this, and passed it on to him. He had the resources. He purchased the property. We then went on to get the zoning approval, get the historic approval, and we are coasting towards a building permit in June. So the project is moving forward.
But it's not your
Not anymore, but not ownership, but it's, we're designing the project. And, I think the lesson for us was just, being nimble and, not just accepting a loss, but keep going and rolling forward and figuring out how to keep it going. We love this project, just to be the designer for it. We're really honored and really happy.
put that as contingency when you sold it to, that you had to be the architect.
I think it was implied. So to give you a sense of this project, it's an extremely complicated project. I'm probably going to be lucky that he took it over. Essentially, this is what it looks like. It's two or three brownstones and two carriage houses. The building was combined. It wasn't residential when we started this project. It actually was commercial. It was the I forget the name. It was a nonprofit that was moving out of the city. So it already had an elevator core, it had stair towers, it had some key commercial elements that we're actually reusing, and there's a major cost savings in doing that. But what we are doing is modifying the building significantly. So a lot of the brick-bearing walls, we're opening up doorways. We are adding essentially a double-loaded corridor in the back, which is this part here. So it's a huge addition. It's about 10,000 square feet we're adding 10,000 square feet in the back. We are connecting it, so a lot of what we're doing is adding circulation that connects basically hallways that connects the units through the fourth floor. And it was a very delicate process to get this approved because we are dramatically changing this building. But again, it's really like from 15th Street, you're really not going to see it. You have to kind of come up close. And this is what the addition looks like. It's very contemporary, but it's also very much dialed in. You have clear references between the windows and sill heights and cornice lines. There's a balcony above the second floor. A lot of what we're doing is really restoring the historic part of this building to be historic. So there's renovations that like every decade this building was renovated, and we're more or less pulling that all off, going back to the original, so that we have two parts. We have a really contemporary part that reflects today, and then we have the old original parts.
Is this a rendering or an actual?
It's a rendering. He did them, so that's high praise. These are, I'll go back. So we're also adding, a courtyard, as I mentioned. There's a big entrance here where it was a carriage house door. And, there's balconies, and then there's a central courtyard that's going to be a really key part of the project. And I'm going to leave it right there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I showed you a lot, so anything at all. Go back to it again. Thank you.
that last written house on Waverly and 15th?
Not yet. It's